We are bringing the podcast into the real world with our first ever in-person event, an evening of curiosity and conversation hosted in downtown Chicago, February 19th, 2026. Picture an intimate dinner party stacked with speakers, all guests from some of your favorite episodes, and space to make new child-free friends. Seats are limited, so you can read all the details and get your ticket by visiting Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman/2026 event. Welcome to Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, a podcast exploring today's most interesting topics through the lens of a happy child-free life. Every week, I chat with experts inspiring us to think differently, live intentionally, and find fulfillment on our terms. Whether you're child-free or seeking a space where parenthood isn't part of the conversation, you are welcome here. It's not about comparison, it's about possibility. Before we start the episode, do you know about the Curious Life Club on Substack? It's a free community to enjoy bonus content and sneak peeks, and to connect with other cool women like you. Join us at CuriousLifeOfAChildFreeWoman.substack.com. Now let's get curious together. Stand-up comedy requires a specific type of confidence. Comedians stand in front of a group of strangers and share their perspective on things that society largely tries to smooth over or make more palatable. And for today's guest, Natasha Vaynblat, one of those topics is living child-free. Natasha is a comedian and writer whose work you've seen on The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon, Comedy Central, The New Yorker, and more. Lately, her work has gotten more personal. She's been writing and performing about what it's like to make choices that don't fit neatly into other people's expectations, including her decision not to have kids. Her current live show, Childless Freak, uses humor to explore the reactions, assumptions, and pressure that tend to show up when a woman makes this choice. I'm really excited to talk with Natasha about comedy, honesty, and what it's like to put our unconventional choices out in the public. Welcome, Natasha.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Okay, let's start with the art of being a comedian. This is a field as a profession that I look to with so much admiration. I feel like it takes so much courage and confidence to do anything where you're putting yourself out there in the comedy space. And then we also hear these things about it being a hard path to be a comedic writer, actor, all of the above. So what made you want to go into this work?
Well, both of those things you say about it are absolutely true. What made me go into it was just a love I had since I was a kid. So I always loved performing and being funny, and I actually discovered improv comedy when I was in high school. And I think that's when really the gear started turning, because I had done plays and things like that even in middle school, but I always got cast in the funny roles. I just never approached it as an actor. And I think discovering improv and realizing that you could make up comedy on the spot and perform the things that you were writing was the thing that opened up the path for me to pursue being a comedian. So that was the first moment where I was like, oh, it seems like people somehow have a career out of this. And then I did it in college and discovered the Upright Citizens Brigade, which is a theater in New York. You mentioned you're in Chicago. I actually originally thought I would move to Chicago because Second City is there, which is this gold standard, this beacon of improv comedy and sketch comedy. And then I just saw this theater troupe perform at an improv festival, and it changed everything for me. I remember seeing them and thinking, I have to go where they are because I want to do comedy exactly like they do. And that started the whole trajectory.
I don't know if calling is too strong of a word, but something where you knew early that you're interested in this, and then the more you see it, you felt like I have to be up there.
I mean, honestly, I think for everybody, the dream is to find something you're good at and then just keep doing that. So I would love to say it's, oh, this passion. And it is, but it was also the first thing I was good at. And so I was like, well, I'm doing that. So that really is where it started.
But you still enjoy it, right? It was the first thing.
Yes.
Tell me how your love has evolved.
Well, I think it is involved because as I get older, the things I want to talk about are more mature and nuanced. And what continues to be such a beautiful surprise is I can still do that through comedy. So even with this new show I have called Childless Freak, It's an hour of comedy all about the very difficult decision it was for me to decide that I wanted to not have kids and to pursue a child-free life. It was so, I guess, inspiring or reaffirming to realize that I could still talk about these complicated issues, but still through my skill as a comedian, that made me think, oh, wow, this is a skill and passion that will evolve as I evolve. And that has been the thing that's re energized me.
I do think it's rare. There are some jobs we can work and it doesn't really limited by age and you can just work in that job for a long time. But to have something that's creative and expressive and feels like a passion and to maintain that passion as we change, as we grow up, as we have different interests and our lifestyle evolves, I don't think every field works like that. And it probably doesn't work like that for everybody in comedy either. So that sounds like a blessing.
Yeah, it's been really lovely to feel that it can grow with me. And I will say, I didn't assume that I was going to do stand up because my first love was improv. And then just the more I did comedy, the more confidence I gained as somebody who could speak from my own perspective. So then I started writing, but I first started with sketch comedy, which is you're writing comedic scenes, or I was doing character monologues. So again, not myself, but some comedic idea. And stand up was by far the scariest for me because that was the most intimate and the most you sharing your own personal thoughts and POV. There's less to hide behind so that if it fails, it's entirely on you. If it fails, there's not only nothing to hide behind, but it feels like a statement on who you are as a person. Because it's like, well, here are my thoughts, and the audience response is, we don't like them. Versus if it's a sketch or if it's a character, you can hide behind the idea. And then with improv, if it doesn't work, well, it was in the moment and it was a group ensemble. So just the more confidence I built, the more also I wanted something with higher stakes. So granted, I've been doing it for the last decade, but still has felt like the newest under the comedy umbrella for me.
For those of us who don't do it, to me, it looks like the most vulnerable thing. And everybody has their thing that seems scary or intimidating or big. And that's very different for all of us. But just the way you articulated that, it's true. You're up there, not just by yourself, and in most cases you are, but it's really your perspective that you're leaning on to get a reaction. What could be more intense? I just respect it so much.
Thank you. I think everybody has their own thing that's frightening. I can't do math in front of people.
Me neither. I can't do math in front of people or by myself that well.
Yeah. We all have our hill that is maybe too hard to climb.
How do you know what's funny when you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to write a set to go share and it's going to be your ideas, your perspective? Do you walk through the world and feel like you're just always noticing things that are funny? Or do you sit down and go backward? How do you even know what to talk about?
The answer is both. So, yes, now that I've done comedy long enough, my brain is attuned to noticing something comedic and writing it down. In my phone, there's a notes app with thousands of ideas that are just half ideas. But I don't know if those are good until I test them out. And so I do that in a variety of ways. One is going to an open mic, which is a show where it's really just other comedians in the audience, and you're just saying a joke out loud and seeing if there is some sort of response. And a lot of times, simply saying something out loud to a group of people, you hear whether it works or not, or how to revise it. Simply the act of doing it in public helps. And then I also have several other comedians who we are just collaborative partners now. So if I have a joke that's a seed of something, we'll hop on a Zoom and just share jokes and give each other feedback that way. So there's various stages that I ramp up. But even in this show that I've now done a few times, but it's the way it started, so much of the material, and even at the time, I thought this is the strongest stuff I've written. Even the year of revising it has completely changed. So what I thought was funny then is so different than what I think is funny now.
Okay, that's interesting. It's like the evolution of the work, but the evolution of yourself, right? When I look at creative stuff that I did years ago, now I think it's not necessarily terrible, but boring or flat or something, because I'm just like, I'm in a different place now.
Entirely.
So it sounds like you're always in relation to the work. You're creating the work, but it also, does it have to feel like you're in relation and it's working for who you are today to get up and say it?
Yeah, and I think for an audience to respond to it, because we as human beings are very versed in sensing the energy, the tone, the truth of something. So there's something that I can't describe, but I think most performers would agree when you're being sincere, and the audience knows as well. This thing you can't categorize, but for me, a way that I sometimes can get into that space is if I'm doing a set where it's jokes that are old and new. I actually like to start with a new joke because I perform it with a little bit more gusto or vulnerability. I don't know what that then translates to the rest of the set. So even my old material still feels fresher. And that's something I just discovered through my years of doing comedy. Because before I would think, oh, I should do the strongest, oldest material first because I know that it will guarantee a laugh. And what I didn't think about is the performance aspect where you need to feel and the audience needs to feel like there is a little bit of danger there so that it feels like live comedy.
I've become friends with she's so many things, but among those, she's a speaking coach and she came on this show early on. She's also passionately child free, but she talks a lot about influential speaking and how to use your voice in a way that's really influential and how we sort of have this myth that if you practice enough, if you speak enough, if you go on enough stages, if you're in front of people enough, the nervousness will go away. It'll just be like a breeze. It'll be natural. You won't have to prepare. And her thing is, if that happens, you've given up on the message. Part of the passion is those feelings like, oh my God, I'm going to throw up, even if you're an acclaimed speaker that goes in front of thousands all the time. But that's a mark that you really care about the stuff you're talking about. And that reminds me of this. When it's new material, there's a little bit of edge or maybe risk for you to go out and do it. We can feel that. And it almost makes it feel like we're in it with you. We want to support when we can feel that energy. I don't know how to describe it either, but I think it's real.
I totally agree. And what that woman said hits home exactly. I think it is a fine line though, because you don't want your audience to think that you're nervous. So you have to walk this line of demonstrating that you're in control and they're in good hands, but also that this isn't rote.
Okay, well, let's talk about Childless Freak. The name's amazing. And I was so excited to hear that you were doing this when you reached out and just shared the concept. I thought it was so cool because we talk about child free life. We really come here to talk about things that we're just interested in learning more about. And comedy and a comedic path is one of those things for me. And I know many listeners, but also we talk about what it is like to be child free from different angles. And I feel like humor is missing from the equation. So, what made you want to do a comedy set about this choice?
Well, I don't think I originally had this specific intent in mind. It came from the fact that when I process anything I'm thinking about, I do it through writing, and I naturally am a comedic writer. So it simply came about first. I just had jokes that were under this umbrella of being child free. But then the more the set started to grow, the more I realized I could actually specifically focus on this question. And it was also just really therapeutic because I was really ambivalent about the choice for years. So it did two things. One, these are just birthed from journal entries of me just trying to understand what's going on in my mind. And then taking those and trying to build an entire show out of this very confusing state I was in, while also celebrating the choice and giving space to the idea that it's not an easy choice for everybody to make. But that doesn't mean it can't be one that you then love and celebrate or realize was the best choice for you in the end.
Do you want to share more of your journey from ambivalence to coming to a decision?
Sure. I mean, a lot of it also is in the show, so I absolutely want people to come see it. But yes, I can give you like a little teaser, which is that I think many women assume that it was just the track that I was going to be on. I grew up in the suburbs. Every adult I knew was a parent. It just didn't seem like a question, even. It's when you become an adult, part of that journey is becoming a parent. And so I just was somebody who just kept delaying it. But I never questioned that I would do it. But it was just something I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's certainly a priority, but it's not a top priority. My career is my priority. Other things are priorities. And then I got to 35 And the advice everybody was giving me was to freeze my eggs just to give myself more of a runway. And I was surprised at how I didn't want to consider that at all. It is an involved process, but it's not prohibitive. If it's something that you want to delay, it's totally possible. And for me, even the barrier to entry of having to consider where I would freeze my eggs, the hormones, all of it, I immediately did not want to add to my to-do list. So that invited the conversation to have with myself. If you're not even willing to do this, why do you assume that this is still a priority for you? Also, if I wasn't going to freeze my eggs, it was a question of, okay, well, my fertility window is starting to close drastically. Obviously, there are people who have kids even at 40, but I knew that if it was something I was interested in, and if I wasn't going to freeze my eggs, it was a decision I needed to make soon. And so that opened up the conversation for myself. So as soon as I decided that I was going to give myself essentially the year to think about it, and spoiler, it took way more than a year, but I read every book under the sun about maternal ambivalence. If there's a book out there, I have read it because I realized I had just had this huge hole in my mind about life outside of the traditional framework. I'm in a heterosexual marriage. All of that felt like I was headed towards that path. And it was also beautiful for my husband and I to discover that we both didn't want it. He also grew up in the suburbs. We're operating under the assumption that there was not an alternative. I realized I had so few examples of what a happy, healthy life, not filled with regret, is what everybody tells us, it was a possibility. So I immediately was like, oh, I need to educate myself. And part of that was not only reading, but talking to people who also didn't have kids, listening to podcasts about people who didn't have kids. It was so, so vital for my education.
I love that you took the initiative to find those things. And at the same time, it's annoying that we have to work so hard to go find them. We all just operate, it's the default. I grew up in the same way. I just always assumed when I meet the right man, when I have the right job, when I have a certain amount of money, when I'm a certain age, then I'll probably want to be a mom. And then I realized in my early 20s, the closer I get to that, even though I was still very young, the closer I got to being grown up, the more I felt like that seems totally misaligned. And then when I was like, what if I just never have kids? It felt like such a huge relief to me, which is a signal, but everybody comes to this in their own time. And I felt then, what a trailblazer I'm being because there's nobody in the movies. There's nobody in the shows that I watch. I can't think of a celebrity who I admire who is child free. We just have so few examples of being well adjusted, normal, not over the top, but also not miserable, right? Just like normal women who've chosen this path. And representation is everything. That's what allows us to even open our brain to the choice.
Truly. And I think what you said about not a character who's just wild and off their rocker, that to me was so important, especially with this hour, because I didn't want it to be a bunch of jokes about how people are dumb for having kids. Ha ha. Or I'm this crazy partier. Now my life is crazy. Because it just wasn't true to me. And also was part of the reason it made me so scared to choose this is because I felt like the only other option was crazy cat lady or just woman who refuses to stop partying. It feels like those are kind of the only two. That's why I call the show Childless Freak, because the issue for me is I was so worried that if I chose this life, I would feel and others would see me as this freak of nature, when in reality, it's just simply another option. It took me so long to feel that that was true.
I get it. I don't blame you. I think it does take a long time for any of us to see it's just a parallel path. There's no better, there's no worse. It's just this one lifestyle choice that we're making differently from people who decide to become parents. And then what an exhale to be like, we're actually fine and we're going to continue to develop and evolve just as people who are parents do, maybe in different ways, maybe even in faster ways sometimes. But I just think the fact that you have created a show in the comedy space where we are there to laugh and have fun. I want to know what you think on this too. I still feel like there's room for more celebratory, fun, happy energy, not like Samantha Jones, full on party sex freak, right? Although, good for you if that's your lifestyle. Love her. Love anybody who's living that way. Have fun with this as our life path.
Yeah, I think the more that we can push against the assumption that if you don't do this, you will regret it later, or you are sad, or you have failed in some way, the better. And I think there's a myriad of experiences of child free women that prove that to be true. And so much of it is wrapped up in joy. One, this show, even though specifically about the decision to have kids, to not have kids, it is ultimately a show about the beauty and the difficulty of making decisions and the reality that if it is a decision that means you are closing the door on some things, opening the door in other ways, but you don't get to have everything. You don't get to have it all. And that I think is another wrong thesis that's been pushed on us, that this idea that in life you get to have it all, I think it dilutes our experience. And I think there's something really beautiful to choosing a path and sacrificing some things, because thus the things that you then are rewarded with feel even richer and more special. And now that I have embraced this choice, it has been so wonderful to see how, yes, it has opened my life up to embracing so many joys that I think I didn't embrace before simply because they didn't feel like a choice I had made. So, specifically, I mean, now that my husband and I are like, we're no longer considering kids, how do we make sure that our life is still rich and social and full of our found family? And so we started hosting dinner parties all the time, and our apartment has become this place of culture for our friends and gathering. And that wouldn't have come about, or certainly not as intentionally as it has now, because of the decision we made.
That's beautiful. It does open a space. And I love what you said about decisions. I cannot wait to come and see your show. However that's happening, it has to, because I feel like we usually just see the downside, that we had to make a choice. And then something in our brain just wants to focus on the one we didn't get instead of just fully embracing the one that we do get. So whether we're talking about this, which is a critical choice, or so many other things we do in life, as you said, we just don't have time to do it all. I can't live on a farm and raise baby cows and live in a big city and do, there's just not enough years. We can't do everything that comes to mind. And I don't want us to be stuck in the thing that we didn't get. I want us to just go 2 feet into the thing that we can get. And as you said, have intention around how big can we make it? How deep can we go?
Yeah. And I think there is a level to maturity that you get when you do make a choice. I think that is somehow baked into becoming a parent because it is this big choice and something you commit to. And so I think the other piece that was difficult for me for a while was I was worried that if I didn't become a parent, I wouldn't reach a level of maturity. And now, having embraced life being child free, I realize, oh, simply by making a proactive choice about your life, it does make one feel that you are maturing. I think by choosing it proactively, it has made me feel that I have matured in a way that I think I wouldn't have if I hadn't made a choice.
That's so well said. It's true. My friends who are moms, I feel like, oh, well, you're the real grown up. If there's a crisis, I'll defer to you. You're a mom. That's like an automated subconscious reaction. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute. We've done all the work on self-awareness, right? There's so much that pours into making this decision and then also sustaining the decision when you do cross those age limits, or somebody who's really important to you has an opinion that goes the other way. The questions we get, it's one thing when it's like a crazy Uber driver. It's different when it's your sibling or your best friend or somebody who's like, my kids won't have cousins because you're not having a baby. We go through all those conversations. There's an inevitable maturity and just self-development to speak to those things and stand up to those things and then go back by yourself and think, how do I really feel about those things? So I appreciate you bringing recognition to that.
And I don't want to understate, I do think being a parent, there's now a huge level of responsibility that does make you so much more mature in how you have to put yourself second and those things. I think for so long, we have thought that if you don't become a parent, there's no way to be responsible. And I do think all of the self growth and actively considering one's biases and life choices is, I guess, strengthens one's skill when it comes to being a responsible adult.
How has this concept of the show, even the title, how has this been received when you're going to your comedic friends and getting maybe behind the scenes insights on the jokes or just playing things out? What's the reaction been?
It's been overwhelmingly positive. The title, I think, self-selects, so I don't know if somebody who's very pro-traditional family model would self-choose to go to a show called Childless Freak. But with that said, there is a part of the show that I also open it up for parents in the audience to talk about parenthood. And I think my friends who are parents were very pleasantly surprised at how welcoming the show was, as opposed to a show that just celebrates not having kids and dunks on parents. That's not the intention at all.
I was really worried about that when I started this podcast. I was really worried that people were going to be offended just by its existence and that moms would think that I was doing something to put their lifestyle down, which is not the intention at all. As we've said, it's just a parallel path. I'm just trying to create a space where we're focused on the other lifestyle. And I celebrate all the spaces that are designed for parents and motherhood and all of that as well. I think we both need them. Do you feel like there is still this assumption out there that if we're talking about something child free, people think like, oh, they're just going to crap on parenthood? Or do you feel like that's getting any better?
I think it is getting better, and I think I have found, and granted, these are my friends, these people are already warm to me, but I have found my friends who are parents have been the most excited and receptive because when we discuss that there are two good options, I think it takes the pressure also away from parenthood being someone's sole identity and someone's sole marker of success. So I think it actually benefits all women and I would say people in general when we don't put so much pressure on motherhood being the ultimate best only choice.
We definitely need more of that narrative for everybody. I don't know if you've experienced this, and if you haven't, I'm sure you will. It's amazing to me how many moms reach out and have some expression of either I never really paused to think about it being a choice. I wish I would have had more space to think about it being a choice. And of course, there's always the caveat that I love my kids. I love my kids. I wouldn't change it, but I didn't really have the understanding or the upbringing or whatever to consider that there was another path. I get a lot of that. And I also get a lot of people who are happy to be parents, but really desperately trying to prevent it from becoming their whole identity. So being able to dip into these conversations or explore these types of rooms and platforms, I think can be very therapeutic for them.
Entirely. Because I think there's a lot of pressure that if you don't immediately love motherhood or aren't a perfect mom, fail in various ways, I think it can be so debilitating. Hearing the show and hearing talk about somebody who was really unsure and also hearing other women who are moms in the audience share complaints about motherhood is really freeing.
The community that has developed from this podcast is incredible. And I am so excited to meet in real life. We're hosting our first in person event, an evening of curiosity and conversation focused on the power of self expression. Picture a luxurious dinner party, luxurious drinks, mingling, mixing here in downtown Chicago on February 19th, 2026. And the event is also stacked with speakers from some of your favorite episodes. Trisha Brook is delivering a custom keynote on the power of using our authentic voice for positive influence. We have a self-expression panel featuring sustainability expert Ashley Piper, transformative wardrobe stylist Shelley Carlson, and nervous system expert Olivia Marie. The event is going to be kicked off with an intention-setting meditation hosted by Nadine Cherry. These are the voices we already love, and now we have the opportunity to meet face-to-face. Come to learn, ask questions, connect with cool child-free women, and embrace the kind of inspiration that lasts through the entire year. Seats are intentionally limited to keep this intimate, and tickets are first come, first serve. So if you've been listening to the podcast and thinking, I want to be part of a community of women like this is your invitation. Grab your ticket by visiting curiouslifeofachildfreewoman.com/2026 event. I cannot wait to see you there. Yeah, safe space. I love that. We're talking about parenting and being child free in general. How do you see comedy as a reflection of culture?
I think it's an amazing reflection of culture because for comedy to work, you have to be able to notice something that speaks to everybody or an observation that is not your own observation, but then process it comedically. I think it's been really nice to see how many more women are talking about this. So I think we have a lot of new great stand-up specials about women who are moms talking about motherhood, which is why I was also so eager to do my own version of, okay, well, let's talk about what it's like to choose not to have kids. Now, I feel like as comedy is a more saturated pool of voices, there's also now more space for someone to say something that's in the middle, to say, like, I really was unsure. And this is a special for people who find that it's hard to make this decision.
That may be the most underrepresented voice yet, I think, in this dynamic. There's people like me who I've known for a long time. I'm so happy to be child free. I don't lay awake for a second. I spent this weekend at a friend's house with kids, and it was a wonderful time, and I love their kids. And I left thinking, I love my life so much. I'm so glad that I'm going home now. As much fun as I had. So there's that. And then we also have a very emotional perspective for people who wish they could be mothers and aren't. I think there's just like a lot of polarization, which I'm making it sound bad. I actually think there's so much progress and more perspectives is good. I think more perspectives are being shared, but I also think the ambivalence is so much more prevalent than we probably realize in culture. And it is critical to bring a voice to that. We don't always feel like I'm 100% this, I'm 100% this. I've known it my whole life. Not everybody is that way.
And I think we're not really taught to make thoughtful decisions. I think that is an excellent marker of a society I want to be a part of, where it's not prescriptive, but it's, I guess, what would be the opposite? Suggestive, or that's not the right word. But I think as an American society, but I would say in a variety of cultures, it's like, this is the way you live. And if you live this way, that means you are a good person. You're doing life right. And I think we would all benefit from instead educating people on how to make choices that are right for them.
Yes. I want everything that I'm going to say for all genders, all everybody. I feel a closeness with women, and most of the people who listen to this show are women. And we have conversations about, to me, the best possible outcome for society, the best next chapter would be for women, all people, to have space to get to know themselves well enough, to get to know the options and make the choice that's right for them. And just take all the energy we're spending deciding what's the good choice, what's the bad choice, what's right, what's wrong. If we could just siphon all of that into learning and getting curious and being open, and then stepping into a decision. And as you said before about decision making, embracing it and learning how to do that without spending energy regretting the other side. That to me would be the biggest win of all. And it sounds simple, but it's so not.
I think it's crazy how difficult it is, especially because we don't really talk about it. For me, so much of decision making has also been wrapped up in fear. And I think that's because I did succeed traditionally for so long. So choosing something off of the prescribed path was very scary for me because I got great grades in school. I was very much this high achieving kid who knew the rules, followed the rules, benefited from following the rules, was celebrated for it. Crazy to say, but even though pursuing an artistic career was definitely rebellious, my parents are not artists, are very traditional. So that certainly was rebellious. But going back to your first question, it was such a clear passion of mine that there was no question that I wanted to do anything else. Where with this decision, I wasn't somebody who immediately knew that they didn't want kids. I could truly see the benefit of both. I could see myself as a mother, and I could also see myself as not being a mother, because this was a moment where I was like, oh boy, both options are good options. And I actually don't have the skill to do something that feels rebellious, that it took so long.
That's really interesting. I'm an entrepreneur outside of this. I have a brand business, and you tell people and they're like, but why? Are you sure you're going to have to like make money by yourself and get people to pay you that money? For some people, it really breaks their brain. And it is a courageous thing to do in society, even though we do have examples of artistic careers, creative careers that work. I don't know. It still has this level of risk to put yourself out there. But anyway, it's interesting how even though you've been succeeding in that for so long, we just feel differently about different decisions in our lives and different pieces of ourselves. It doesn't mean that just because we have the confidence to go full throttle in one area, we can do that across the board.
Totally. Yeah, and that was fascinating for me to learn about myself.
I love the journey of learning that you've been on, and I love that you're sharing it.
I feel so lucky to have come out the other side and so excited about my choice that I'm like, yeah, all I want to do is talk about it. Because as I was listening to podcasts and I was in the beginning of this thought process, that's all I needed to hear was other people saying that it's possible to be happy on the other side of something very difficult and how they did it.
Well, it goes such a long way in just representation and making it seem possible. And you never know who's going to connect with a piece of you, a piece of your personality, your point of view, and just make it feel a little bit more possible for them to go down that life path.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about the show and what the plans are. So I'm sure everyone listening is like, how do I get there? Where do I go see it? So tell me more about how that works.
Yeah, so I'm performing it in New York. So tentatively, I just did it at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater again. And so I don't have new dates yet, but new dates are coming. So until then, you can just follow my Instagram. I'll be dropping fun, child-free content there. It's in this stage where it is continuing. I wish I had specific details for you. I don't have them, but more will come.
That's okay. That's great. We will make sure your Instagram is in the show notes so people can follow. And also, we should keep in touch because I'm happy to share in my content with Substack all the things because I know people are going to want to know and I want to know so I can come to New York and see you. I know we have to meet in person. I think you have a different perspective on, I don't want to say the child free industry because I don't really think it's an industry. There's like 6 of us who are doing something in this space. As just from response to your show and somebody who's now putting out this content, where do you think that we are headed culturally, society, and our feelings about being child free?
That is such a great question. And I don't know because I think it could really go so many ways. I think part of living in New York City and being in this liberal bubble, I feel like my sense of the world is also a little skewed because when I visit my family in Virginia in the suburbs, it's a totally different world. So I think the ability that I have had to put up this show, and I think the amount of interest I've seen outside of New York makes me really optimistic about how this conversation is growing outside of these very liberal pockets. With the way like our administration is going, I also see the push on the other side to limit women's freedom of choice. I think we're at a very interesting point where I don't know. I am optimistic, but I'm also aware that this is a really strange time in culture.
It's so true that when you're in a different environment, geographic environment, your view can really change. Chicago is certainly a liberal bubble, but that has also burned me before when I've been shocked by certain things that have happened. And I go about my day like, what do you mean? We're all in agreement on this one. And then it's like, no, just you and your 10 friends in this liberal city. Apparently the rest of the world is different. So it's a complex thing.
Yeah, I think because it's become so much easier for me to find this content, I am optimistic. I would say ultimately, I think the conversation is expanding and growing. But yeah, I am also aware that it's hard to know.
It's hard to know. Do you have any advice or inspiration for a woman listening who maybe is stepping into her child-free power and wants to express that more or make it part of her life in a more public way, whether that's just with her friends and family or even beyond that? Do you have any words of wisdom to share for somebody as somebody who is out there with it publicly?
That's a great question. I would say if you're passionate about your point of view, I think that is the seed to follow. Because for me, I don't think I was ready to share these thoughts until I felt like I had a clear understanding of where I was coming from. So I think when I was in a deep space of ambivalence, I think personally, I'm glad I took the time to really investigate what I was thinking, what I was feeling. And when I came out the other side, all I wanted to do was talk about it and to share how excited I was and how freeing it felt to make a proactive choice about my life. So I would say follow your passion. If you feel like you're ready to share, I think there's so much room and so many eager listeners. But I would say if you're nervous, then take the time to really understand how you feel and follow that instinct too.
Such wise words.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Natasha, is there anything we haven't talked about that you feel is important to this conversation of comedy, child-free living, any of the above?
So my husband and I talk a lot about how it's so nice that we have the freedom to embrace all of these interests and all of these creative passions. But I think even if we had kids, those passions would still exist. So I think it's really important, regardless of whatever choice you make. I think what you cannot sacrifice is a personal passion. So whatever that passion is, I think that for everybody, regardless of the life path you choose, whether it's parenthood or not, is really important to find and continue to cultivate.
I'm glad you said that. Unfortunately, it seems like that's the first piece we sacrifice to work schedules or just commitments. And I've definitely been in rooms where it's like, what's your hobby? And you're like, I don't know. Occasionally I go to a bar. I don't know. I've lost that. And when we're younger, we have more time and freedom to do that. So I think that's important for us to focus on.
I think so too.
Thank you so much for coming. I love what you're doing. I love your perspective. I think it's much needed. I appreciate the tone that you bring to this conversation. We have to go and see you. Maybe I'll start something in the Curious Life Club. When you have your next round of dates, I'll pick a date to come and then I'll share that. So who knows? Maybe we can have some little meet and greet gathering.
I would love that. And thank you for this platform and continuing the conversation in such an empathetic, curious way. So I really appreciate it too, as a listener.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. Love fest all around. If this episode sparked something in you, come and join the conversation on Instagram at Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman. You can find more stories, guest insights, and moments that remind us why curiosity is so important. Speaking of curiosity, we're hosting our first in-person event, an evening of curiosity and conversation, February 19th here in downtown Chicago. Seats are intentionally limited and tickets are going fast. So get yours by visiting CuriousLifeOfAChildFreeWoman.com/2026 event. And serious bonus, our keynote speaker, Trisha Brooke, has generously offered our listeners access to her free monthly workshop series. To learn more and sign up for the workshop, visit the link in the show notes. Until next time, let's stay curious together.